Tim Hansel's book. The title of it, When I Relax, I Feel Guilty. And I was wondering if I was feeling guilty because I'm not doing enough for the Lord. Wondering if I think because I'm not involved in the work of the kingdom in the same way I used to be. Am I any good to Him? But then when I read his introduction, it reminded me, sometimes the last thing that we want is more of God. We want the feeling that comes from being godly, but we just don't want to pay the price. And he says this, I would like to buy $3 worth of God. Please. Not enough to explode my soul or to disturb my sleep, but just enough to equal a cup of warm milk or a sweet snooze in the sunshine. I don't want enough of Him to make me love a black poor man or pick beets with a migrant. I want ecstasy, not transformation. I want the warmth of the womb, but not a new birth or change. I want a pound of the eternal in a paper sack. I would like to buy $3 worth of God, please. You know what? That's too close to being truth for a lot of us. We want the feelings of God on our side, but we don't necessarily want to pay the price. One of the things that separates the heroes of the Bible from the ordinary folks that lived in the world, they were no smarter than anybody else. They were no braver, because we read sometimes Paul saying he came to the people at Corinth with trembling knees. He was afraid to preach to them. They're not ones who have all the answers, because some of the writers of the Bible said, I didn't have a clue. What made them different, though, is what they did. So I want to tell you a story today, a story about a hero of the Bible. I struggled this week trying to figure out who to talk about. Well, Moses comes to mind because Moses is a great, but we know his story. I thought, well, maybe I'll tell everybody how Peter became a disciple, Luke chapter 5, but it just didn't fit right. And then I thought about, well, let me talk about Paul and his transformation, his blindness, and then he became a Christian. And I thought, maybe Hosea, maybe Habakkuk. Habakkuk's one of my favorite characters of the Old Testament because of one of his sermons. And so I would look into that, and it just wouldn't work for me. And then I thought, well, I'll go to my old standby. My favorite character in the Old Testament, Joshua. And talk about his courage and talk about him filling in for somebody who left. And so I started to read Joshua chapter 1. Turn with me there. And I can imagine myself taking all the people of the church and saying, now listen as we talk about this person. And trying to excite you for the possibilities that you too can become like Joshua. You too can turn the world upside down. You can have the courage to change things. But it didn't work out for me to talk about Joshua either. Because I went to chapter 2 of Joshua. Then Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men as spies secretly from, I hate that word. Let me ask you, how do you pronounce that? S-H-I-T-T-I-M? Now bear with me, if you don't learn anything else today, this will come in handy. Then Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men as spies secretly from Shittim, is how you pronounce it. Whatever else you were thinking. Saying, go view the land, especially Jericho. So they went and came into the house of a harlot, whose name was Rahab, and they lodged there. And try as I might not to want to preach a lesson about Rahab, that's who I have to talk about today, because she truly is one of the great heroes of the Scriptures. Now imagine this. Imagine some of these young people going home and their folks asking them, well, what did you hear at church today? Well, the preacher said we can become like one of the people of the Bible. And who did he talk about? Well, he talked about Rahab and how can you become like her? Well, I don't remember much about it, but he said we can become like the harlots. And what's so interesting is that's true. We can become like Rahab and change the course of human events. Now, I'm not going to say a lot about her because I don't have time. But one thing that I'll come back and point out to you is something that's great in her life can be in our life also. I don't know about your background, but I studied in a very religious, conservative, pious atmosphere. The school that I went to was very, very structured. Not everybody that started in my class, there were 37 of us that started in class. 22 of us graduated in a year. There were only 4 of us left standing or preaching. Because we couldn't keep the rules. Because we couldn't be what we were taught we were supposed to be. And some guys fed up with it, couldn't pass the test, gave up on it. We were controlled by spiritual pride. We were the right people, the right stuff, do the right thing. One of the things that we never did in this very pious atmosphere is talk about Rahab the harlot. Because what do you do with people like her? You claim that she was baptized into the churches of Christ and she repented and never went back to harlotry? Well, you can make that claim, but the Bible doesn't say that. The Bible doesn't teach that. Could you say that when the Jews came into her house, she became like a Jew? Well, one of the things that I'm going to point out to you, what's made her a hero, she didn't change for the Jews. As a matter of fact, it would have been better if the Jews would become more like her, the Canaanites. I discovered somewhere along the line that there was faith outside my little circle of people, and it really disturbed me. Because if I'm not in the group that's right, why be in the group? If I'm not doing what I should do, then what should I do? Back to my song. I'm looking for something. I just don't know what it is that I'm looking for. Maybe Rahab can show me what it is. And maybe when I find what she found, then some of my questions will be answered. Rahab the harlot, hero of the faith. I see a little kid going home and saying, Mom, what's a harlot? We learn about her in church. Let me tell you what a harlot is. Somebody that was created in the image of God, because we all are. Somebody who has great worth, because we all do. Somebody who God is concerned with, because He's concerned with everybody. And someone who has the chance to make the world better, because that's the opportunity given for every single one of us. I preached my uncle's funeral in Las Vegas, and as I used to do back then, I would not travel anywhere without going to church on Wednesday nights and Sunday mornings and Sunday nights. Nathan remembers all the vacations that we would be at Disneyland, and we had to go to church and not go back to Disneyland. Well, I go to Bible study on Wednesday night at Oakley Boulevard Church of Christ in Las Vegas. Some of you might have been there if you've ever been to Las Vegas. If you're true Christians, you would have went there while you were there. Well, I have to admit to you, this is the way I used to think. That when you go in on a Wednesday night, I saw on their board, it said something like 275 people back then is what they had on Sunday morning. And I looked around and there maybe were 80 on Wednesday nights. And I thought, well, at least this is the 80 faithful, the true Christians, the real ones that care about God. But I also noticed, just because I noticed everything, that there were 2 rows of young ladies. Very, very attractive, healthy young ladies. And it was the week of the WAC volleyball tournaments, and so in my mind I thought it was a girls volleyball team from one of the WAC colleges. So after the Bible class was over, I was standing there, and one of the girls came up to introduce themselves, and she said, "Hi, I'm Bubbles or Mitzi or whatever her name was. And I said, I might, in just trying to make conversation, which has always been difficult for me with any woman, let alone young, healthy ones. I said, what are you doing here? Because I wanted to know what school they were from, hoping they said Laramie, and I'd say, well, I used to live in Wyoming, and I like Laramie, or CSU. Well, I grew up in Colorado, we'd have something in common. She turned and she pointed to the other girls, and she said, we're dancers here in Las Vegas. And so I had nothing to say. I mean, what do you say to that? And she saw my uncomfortableness, and she said, and we danced topless. Yeah. So the words just flew out. Then I knew exactly what to say. Now, think about my mind, though. Here's the faithful of the church, because here's those who would come on Wednesday night to a Bible class. The only thing that I had to say, she said, well, we don't wear anything when we work. Trying to get a reaction from me, and I said, well, I wear a tie when I work.
That's all?
Across my heart, this young lady said, well, I won't hold that against you, what you wear when you work, if you won't hold it against us, what we don't wear. Now, it was really, really hard for me, because my conclusion that I came to is she really, and that group of girls, really must not be that faithful, because look what she does. The two spies came to a young lady, Rahab the harlot. My assumption is she's going to be used by God for His purposes, thrown away and forgotten because she can't be of much use. Now, I don't know if you know, in the Old Testament, women were prostitutes, not by choice, but because they were compelled into that lifestyle. One of the things that I wished I would have learned back then, that never struck me until many, many years later, is what we do has very little to do with who we are. Sometimes the circumstances of life chooses our occupations for us. We get to, and here's a great lesson, from the depths of the convictions of our heart, we get to choose what we are. And this harlot has a story. And here's part of her story. It was told the king of Jericho, saying, behold, men from the sons of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land. Who would have known that Jews were coming in the land to spy it out? Only people that would have known is other Jews. You see the point? There's traitors in the land. There's those pious religious people that went to the tabernacle to make their sacrifices week by week. They went through the motions. But when push came to shove, maybe they were like Judas and they got a little bit of money for betraying their people. Maybe it was something to benefit them, to share with the king that Jews are coming in. But the point is, there are those that went against the ones they were supposed to love. And there was this Canaanite harlot who didn't go against her enemies, but for some reason aided them